This is Thank You Mama, weekly lessons from mothers all around the world. Dear friends all over the world, I have a special invitation for you. You might have heard me talk about this in the past episodes, but last summer I finally made my dream true and started Thank You Mama creative writing workshops. And they absolutely surpassed all my expectations. The energy, the magic we created were healing and empowering and just wonderful. So the next workshop is taking place on the weekend of 9th to 11th of June in Vienna. It will include a guided tour through this gorgeous imperial city, a visit to the Art History Museum, lots of creative writing, discussions, and meditations. We will write about our mothers' lives and lessons, but also about our needs and about what we can give ourselves to be the best, happiest versions of ourselves. You can find more information on my website. I will put a link in episode notes. Or please feel free to just shoot me a mail. You'll find it in episode notes as well. You can also reach to me over social media. I would be happy to help you with arrangements and ideas of what else to explore. There is a ton to see and experience in Vienna, but also Prague, Budapest, Munich, and Venice are a few hours on the train away from here. Also, I am relaunching the Thank You Mama newsletter and filling it with information and inspiration I am super excited about and would really love to share with you. You'll find a subscription link in episode notes on my website or in my Instagram link in bio. And finally, if you're enjoying the show and haven't done so yet, please give it 5 stars and a review. It's simple and quick, but it really helps the show to be discovered and to grow. Thank you so much for being here. And here's this week's beautiful conversation. Hello and welcome to Thank You Mama. My name is Anna Teider. My guest today is Jennifer Arthurton. Jennifer is the creator and host of Old Chicks No Shit. Jennifer, hello and welcome. I'm so excited.
Thank you for having me.
When I read about your podcast, I knew you had to be a guest because, as you know, I'm interviewing women from all over the world about the most important things they learn from their moms. And one of my favorite lessons that comes very, very often, in the meantime, I've had 130 interviews, I think, from women from 60 countries. So often they say they saw their moms blossom in their 50s, 60s, even 70s, you know, and they talk about how they witness that it's never too late, for a new career, and you're starting a new business, new life, new love, new you. And this is what you do in your podcast.
Yeah.
So I was very excited to invite you. And also, this is what I've witnessed with my mom, and this is one of my mom's favorite lessons, or my favorite lessons I learned from my mom's, because she had 2 parallel and fantastic careers. She was a movie star, and parallel to that, she was also an award-winning artist. She was very admired and successful, with her being a visual artist and also doing book designs and very many different things. And then she went through a little pause. And in her late 50s, I would say, she bought a video camera and started filming things. And we were like, oh, what's mom doing? But then when she was in her early 60s, she learned how to edit. And she created her first art film, which started winning awards again. This art film brought her back into the limelight. It won awards. It took her to international movie festivals again. And the Museum of Contemporary Art in Zagreb bought it for their permanent collection. So it was beautiful how she, from being an actress and being an artist and then having the break that she did in her 60s, reinvented herself and successfully. It's fantastic.
I love that so much. In fact, I might need to interview your mom on my podcast.
Oh, I wish you could. No, my mom passed away 6 years ago, and and losing her inspired me to start this podcast. This is how this podcast happened, because she was such an amazing woman. And when I lost her, one of the biggest fears I had was I was going to forget everything she taught me. And this is how this podcast happened. But
how beautiful.
But let's talk about you and this amazing project that you have. Tell me about it. How did it happen?
So Old Chicks Know Shit is a community and a podcast designed to inspire midlife women to chase their dreams and to create what I call their kick-ass next chapter. So their best next chapter. And it evolved out of my own experience of, in the year leading up to my 50th birthday, so I had a long corporate career, like a 30-year corporate career. In the year leading up to my 50th birthday, I found myself divorced, unemployed, an empty nester, and I was bedridden with a stress-related illness. And it was as though every identity that I thought I had in the world was stripped from me in a very short space of time. And what I realized was that, I had been so busy raising a family, growing my career, that I had never actually stopped to check in to see if I was doing what I wanted to do. And I also realized that I had lost myself in the process. So without all of the identities that I had in the world, I didn't know who I was. Like, I did not know who the woman was underneath the title of, wife, mother, corporate executive. And at the time I was really into physical fitness. And so even then I couldn't get out of bed. And so I honestly went through a period of thinking that my life was over, because the cultural narrative tells you that at 50, you're on the beginning of the downhill slope to old age oblivion, and that this is the beginning of the end for you.
And as you and I just laughed about and discussed, now we have to laugh about this again. A CNN anchor just said in front of the camera on CNN that women in their 50s are past their prime. And you only need to Google it.
Yeah.
When his co-anchors, the other two ladies were like, "What are you saying?" As a proof or explanation for that.
But that in itself, so what he just regurgitated on CNN is the cultural narrative about what it means to be a woman in your 40s, 50s, and 60s. Like, you're no longer in your prime, you're irrelevant, you're invisible, and it's the beginning of the end for you. And I mean, I bought into that. Like, I bought into that cultural narrative. And for a long time, like, I couldn't see any possibility for the next chapter of my life. I really believed that this was it. This was the end, right? Because if you look at the mainstream narrative or in mainstream media about what it means to be, a woman in your 50s or 60s, what you see is commercials for bladder leakage protection, meal replacement shakes, and retirement plans. And while all those are good and necessary, that doesn't tell even a fraction of the story of what it means to live in this chapter of your life, right? So, after feeling sorry for myself for quite a while, I started to realize that I'm 50 and I have a 30-year, maybe 40 years ahead of me. And this is an opportunity for me to reinvent my life, reinvent myself on my terms. Like, what is it that I want? For the first time ever, I was asking myself the question, what is it that I want? Not what should I do, not what's the right thing to do, but what do I want? And then, when I, realized that I had this chapter, I was like, okay, what's possible for me? And I started, researching, okay, where are all these great older women doing all these amazing things in the world. And it was very hard to find. So I started the Old Chicks No Shit podcast as a way to share inspiring stories about women who have reinvented themselves and reinvented their lives, for this next chapter. Or maybe they're even in their third chapter. And because I wanted other women who might be facing the same dilemma as I was to know what was possible. And then after that, it kind of rolled into the Old Chicks No Shit community where, I host a community of women who are all in the process of reinventing themselves, who need support and accountability and really community, because community is probably the most important thing that we can do is, midlife women supporting midlife women is so unbelievably powerful. And so to bring these like-minded women together and who are all on a mission to create, these women are doing incredible things in their lives, starting businesses, starting charities, tackling physical feats, expressing their creative side, creating businesses out of their art, doing incredible things in the world and sharing their gifts and having that community of women together to, support and inspire each other is just beyond powerful.
Where is this community? How can my listeners find it?
So it's a virtual community. It's online. And you can find all of the details of it on my website, which is oldchicksnoshit.com.
We'll put a link in episode notes so everybody can find it. This is very exciting. Let me ask you about my newest idol, which is Paulina Porizkova. Have you followed her?
Yes.
I accidentally discovered her a few years ago when she, before the book and before the whole thing. And she makes me happy.
Yeah. She's incredible. It's my dream to have her on the podcast.
I can imagine. I've been inviting her to come to mine as well, but she's busy.
Okay, well, whoever gets there first, we need to just put in a good word for the other one.
Let's do that because she's absolutely fantastic. And
she is.
I especially love her aging gracefully attitude. And how she, but how she never ever attacks anybody. Like she never makes anybody feel bad, and she's always very loud and straightforward about, look, it's your choice. Everything's okay. Whatever you choose to do, if it makes you happy, if you feel good about it, awesome. I like that, And every time I feel a little nervous and saggy and wrinkly, I think of my mom, and then I'll go on Paulina's Instagram, and I'm like, I'm fine. I'll be fine.
Exactly.
Before we jump to Mom, can you share some of the most important things you've learned from your guests, or messages, or things you could share with my listeners?
Yeah. The number one thing that I have learned is every single solitary woman who has reinvented herself came at it from the approach of, what can I learn? Because, we tend to see ourselves in a certain way. We tend to see our lives in a certain way. And quite often we think, well, I don't know how to do that. Or, I have no experience with that, so that I can't do it. And every single one of the women who reinvented themselves and did something that they've never done before came to the table with this really open attitude about, okay, I'm just going to learn, right? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to figure it out as I go, and I'm just going to keep learning. So that concept of lifelong learning, like I'm always taking in information and I'm always open to understanding myself better. And that's the other really, really big piece of it, is like learning different things about yourself. And that was key for me on my journey. Right? Like opening parts of myself that had never, ever been exposed to the light before, that desperately wanted to be seen. Right? So the lifelong learning, and I think the other most important lesson is that fear is normal and natural, and it has no bearing on how capable you are of doing whatever it is that you want to do. Just because you're afraid does not mean that you can't do it. So being able to take steps forward in the face of fear, because whenever we step out of our comfort zone, right, like our brain starts screaming at us all the reasons why we shouldn't do it, right? And being able to hear that and just say, well, no, I'm going to try anyway. And in that process, I think we find ourselves so much more capable than we ever possibly dreamed we could be.
Let's talk about mom. Mom, Eilish, she's from Ireland.
Yep.
And that's all I know. Please tell me more about her.
So my mother grew up in Ireland. She left Ireland when she was at the ripe old age of 17 to become an au pair. She moved to Germany, and then she moved to London, where she met my dad. And then together they moved to the Caribbean, which is where I grew up. She was very much a free spirit in that she followed her own rules, as opposed to, whereas I grew up following like all the rule of shoulds. She followed her heart on things and just allowed life to kind of take her wherever it is that she wanted. And I remember like growing up, even she was very ahead of herself in so many respects, like where it came to like, food and things like that. And she would be trying different recipes and, trying to get us to eat all the strange concoctions that she would come up with, a lot of which now have become mainstream today. Like, for example, yogurt drinks. My mother would try and make her own yogurt at home, and it didn't quite set properly. So she determined it was a yogurt drink, and this was the new thing, and she would serve it to us.
I love yogurt drinks, by the way.
I know. She was always experimenting with different ways of doing things. How can I make this more healthy? How can I make that more healthy? And there were times she would chase us kids, she would chase our friends around the dining room table, getting them to try various concoctions. And we would be forever embarrassed. Like, why can't you just be a normal mom? Right. But now being the age that I am now, I so appreciate the fact that she was willing to kind of live by her own rules and, follow her own ideas, her own thoughts, her own heart.
How did she find it in Caribbean? I mean, this is a big move to move from Ireland to the Caribbean. Was your dad from the Caribbean?
Yeah. So that's where my dad grew up, and they decided they wanted to raise their family where it was somewhere warm.
Okay.
But that was the nature of my mother. She would just, it was an adventure to her. Let's go and see what we could, find. Let's explore this way of life. Let me see what I can get from it. Right. She very much just threw herself into the whole experience. And like I said, she just experimented her way through it. Oh, that didn't work. Okay. I don't like that. Well, we'll just try this. Right. Yeah. She was very much kind of just, her own person.
How many children did she have?
2, my brother and I.
So did you guys move to the States at one point, or did you did she stay there forever?
No. So we ended up moving to Canada, which is where I am now.
Oh, yes. You're in Canada. I'm so sorry. Yeah. And so tell me a little more about her and her life or her challenges or...
So my mother actually passed away at the age that I am now. So she passed away from breast cancer when she was 56 years old.
She was young.
And so she was so young. I never got to see her fully, like you were talking about at the beginning, fully blossom into, the woman that she would have been. And at the time she died, she was actually always writing something. She would write short stories. She would write stories for us. She would write like little screenplays and things like that. None of them ever went anywhere, but she just wrote them for her own joy. She was very creative that way. But before she died, before she got cancer, she started writing and sending it out to publishers because she was determined that she was going to get a book published. So, she didn't unfortunately get the book published, but she got a lot of great feedback from publishers on her manuscript, which was a historical romance. And the beautiful thing about it is a couple of years ago, I was cleaning out some old paperwork and we found this manuscript that had all the editor's notes in it. And my daughter decided that she was going to finish the manuscript for her grandmother to take the notes and incorporate it and to finish that book for her, the parts that she didn't get done, which I just think is so beautiful.
It's very beautiful. Is she working on it now or did she finish it?
She is working on it now, slowly but surely. She actually lives in London, England right now, and she is a teacher. So she's very busy, but she's plugging away on it. And one day, hopefully, they will be able to co-author this book that will make it out into the world.
Oh, that would be so beautiful.
wouldn't it?
Yes, I
And it
love
would be
it.
so beautiful.
I love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Has she ever met her grandmother?
Yes. So her
Mm-hmm.
grandmother died when she was 6.
Mm-hmm.
So in the last few years of my mom's life, she actually spent a lot of time with my daughter. I was working my corporate job and she would, stay at home with my daughter, which was really, really good.
Oh,
But I
that's
do wish
beautiful.
like they are two peas in the same pod. And I wish that they had more time together
I
for
know.
sure.
I feel the same way with my son and my mom. He was only 2 when she passed away, and they're so similar in so many ways. And it makes me sad.
I know, right?
Yeah. Let's learn from her. Can you share the most important things you feel you've learned from her?
Yeah. I think one of the most important lessons and one of the things that stands out most about my mother, went from when I was a child, through adulthood, is my mother used to tell me that I could be, do, or have anything that I wanted. And I never fully believed that. But she said, if you just believe in yourself a little bit, you could do this thing. Or if I had, expressed a desire for this, that, and the other, she'd say, go do it. Like, just, you can be, do, or have whatever you want. And at the time I'd be like, oh yeah, you're just saying that because you're my mom. But that lesson has come back to me, like, as I've gone on my own reinvention journey, that lesson has been echoing in my head, in that, the power of belief in ourselves and the courage to keep stepping forward into what we want. Like, we literally can have anything we want. And it's proven out by the women that I interview on the podcast who have done absolutely incredible things in the world. So that lesson just keeps coming back. Like, I can hear it in her voice that I can do whatever I want to do.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And the other, I think, really important lesson was just watching her in action in terms of, being unapologetically yourself, right? Like, I grew up in a, very contrary to my mother, who was a complete spirit. I, followed the rules, did what I was supposed to do. If something was not on that path of the should path, then I wouldn't do it, right? I was very straight-laced that way. And I only realized again when I started my own reinvention journey that like I said at the beginning, I had completely lost myself. I didn't know who I was. And so in this chapter of my life, I vowed to be unapologetically myself. But at first I had to find out who that woman was, right? And I think this is true for so many of us as women, that we just get lost along the way of doing everything for everybody. And so, what I've realized in that lesson is that where we can be our most authentic selves is where we can find our greatest gifts. Unfortunately, when we're living by the rules of somebody else, or living by the rules of duty and obligation, and we're not being our true authentic selves, there are important gifts inside of us that are not being expressed with the world. And that really is our mission and focus in this second chapter of our lives.
And what a big mission.
Yeah, it is. It is. And then, again, her living by example was, there's a solution for every problem and your job is simply to find it. So she didn't take herself too seriously. She didn't take any problem too seriously. It was like, oh, that didn't work. Take the lesson, move on. Let's try this now, or let's try it that way now, right? And I just watched her, like I said, not get bogged down or get stuck or to even beat herself up for making a wrong turn. It was simply just like, oh, lesson, and move on to the next thing, right? And she found creative solutions for all kinds of things. We didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up, and my mother the things that we wanted, she would find a way to make them for us, right? Like, whether it was a toy, whether it was a piece of clothing, whether it was a specific food that we wanted, she would find a way to make it happen. And then I think the last most important lesson was trusting in a power that's greater than you. That it's not just you and your capability, that you have the ability to tap into a greater power, whether you call it the God, universe, the divine, like whatever it is. There is a resource available to you that can help you do whatever it is that you want to do. And I especially got that lesson in the last years of her life, because when she was struggling through cancer, one of the most beautiful gifts she left me was her journals. And after she died, I was reading her journals and understanding how much, she relied on the universe, God, like whatever your name, your term is for it, right? Like to help her navigate this path of illness that she was on, to help her find the strength to do the things that she wanted to do. Had she not been a writer and had she not left those journals, I wouldn't have understood the depth of her commitment. So that was actually like post her death that I really understood how deeply she believed in that. And she, when I was in my 20s, she left me this prayer called Divine Wisdom Prayer, which she typed it out on a little piece of paper and she said, put this in your wallet and just refer back to it whenever you feel stuck. And I still to this day have that piece of paper in my wallet.
What was she religious or more spiritual?
She was a Catholic, but became very disillusioned with the Catholic Church and became just highly spiritual. In fact, she studied and read about all kinds of religions from all over the world because she just had a fascination as to how people related with a higher power and what that meant to them. So she took her teachings from all different religions, but was originally Catholic to start with.
I find it very interesting that she didn't share that so much with you, that you just read it and found it later on.
Well, you know what? And this is the other thing that I realized is that she tried to share it with me, but I wasn't open to it.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so even her giving me that little prayer, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, thanks, Mom. And I just stuck it in. I don't even think I read it. And then once she passed is when I fully digested like what this prayer was about. And then I realized how such a meaningful part of her life that was, but I wasn't open to hearing it at that point.
Wow, these were beautiful. Is there more? Do you feel like there's more that you feel you've learned from her?
Yeah, I think that the one of the biggest things that I've learned really is just I get to live years that she didn't have, right? And often I ask her, how do you want me to live these years? What do you want me to do with this? Because this is an opportunity for me to live the years that she didn't have. Yeah, that's first and foremost in my mind to make sure that.
Wow. So it makes you appreciate life. It makes you appreciate what you have.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Just being alive.
Yeah.
My mom lost her mom when her mom was 32 to cancer, to a very rare form of cancer. So my mom always kept telling me that growing old is luxury. I think this is where she was so in love with life, and I think this is where that came from. When you witness a mom who hasn't lived longer than 32, everything over that is just pure gift. Every day after that is you really know how to appreciate just being here and what a magic it is that we have this life.
Yeah, exactly.
We shortly talked about if there's anything missing, anything you wish she taught you. You said you had trouble thinking of that. Did it happen during our conversation?
I actually think I just said it, right? Like, I think about often if she was alive, what are the lessons that she would tell me that she learned in her 50s and her 60s and her 70s, and how she would impart those wisdom to me. And so that's something that she didn't have the opportunity to share with me. Yeah. So it's become very important to me to be able to fully live these years so that I can then share that with my daughter.
I want to ask you, I'm curious. Can you tell me about your childhood, about growing up in the Caribbean?
It was a very idyllic place to grow up. I mean, we spent all of our time outside, climbing trees, building things, picking fruit, sitting in mango trees, all kinds of things like that. And, I have such fond memories. I'm so happy that I got to grow up with that. And then the other important thing was a really close sense of family, because my dad had a lot of family who lived there still. And so we had this huge, extended family that I wouldn't have got to experience had we stayed living in England. That sense of family and that sense of connection to something bigger than our immediate family has become so important to me, still to this day, so important.
Was it a shock? How old were you when you moved to Canada?
I moved to Canada when I was 12. Well, it was a shock because we moved in January.
Oh, God.
And I remember coming out of the airport, the doors at the airport, and being able to see my breath, which had happened for the first time ever, because winters in England don't get that cold very often. And so being able to see my breath and being, it was being such a strange thing for me. And then, the first thing we did is we went to a store and bought winter coats and mitts, and we were staying in a hotel, and my brother and I went out into the front lawn of this big hotel on the side of a huge highway and built snowmen, because for the first time ever we were playing in snow. So it was quite an experience.
Jennifer, this was so beautiful. Is there anything else you'd like to share with my listeners before we recap?
I think that this podcast, like the work that you're doing about sharing these lessons from mothers, because as you mentioned at the beginning of the show, women really blossoming into themselves, in their 50s, 60s, and 70s it's such a beautiful message that I wish more women, younger women, understood that there's so much more in front of them, that this isn't the beginning of the end, that there's so many doors open to them. And that, as we as women kind of take these lessons and really blossom into who we are, that we can shift the cultural narrative. So things like that CNN anchor, what that CNN anchor said, you know what I mean, are just not true, that it's not as pervasive an idea, because I think a lot of women fear aging because they just can't see the possibilities. And so you sharing these messages about how more women are blossoming into themselves is so incredibly beautiful. And I love it.
Thank you. Thank you. We're sisters in that.
Yes, we are.
Jennifer, let me just quickly recap. So the lessons we learned from Mama Eilish is the power of believing in yourself and knowing that you can be and do and have anything you want. And this is, as you said, it can sound like a cliche, but it's really true. And it's said that we have to become of certain age to understand this and to feel it. I also wish I knew it much younger, although my mom was also telling it to me, but yeah. You see, you need certain age and certain experience for certain wisdom. There is a solution for every problem. You just need to find it. And I love it how you said that she didn't take things too seriously and that she wouldn't get bogged down with problems and things. She would just see them as lessons and move on, solve them and move on. To be unapologetically yourself and always follow your heart. How beautiful is that? We should all learn that. And to trust in a power that's greater than you. Whatever makes you feel comfortable. Is it God? Is it universe? Whatever it is. But to know you're now I'm interpreting this in safe hands. And that
you're not alone.
That you're not alone. And as you said, this ability to tap into this greater power, we can work with it. It can support us in our adventures. And then as something you wish you learned, we talked about how she passed away at the early age of 56 and how in a way this is what she wasn't able to teach you is what's after 56,
right?
And it's beautiful that you are living in now.
Yeah,
this is all I've written down, the most important things, but I also want to go back to your work and the most important messages you've learned from your guests and your interviews. I wrote down what can I learn, this big question of what can being open to learning and developing yourself and lifelong learning. And as a second point, I put the learning new things about yourself as well, not just new skills, but being open to learning about yourself. And that fear is normal, and that fear doesn't mean that you can't do it. We shouldn't allow fear to stop us from anything, actually. Wow, so many powerful messages, Jennifer. Thank you.
Thank you for this conversation. It was really lovely.
It was beautiful. Thank you again. If you enjoy Thank You Mama and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyoumama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Tider. That's Tajder. This was Thank You Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.